And welcome to another Lunch with Philip and Greg. Today's guest is Hayden Black. I first met Hayden in the early days of the digital production buzz when he was one of the pioneers of original online creative content, Goodnight Burbank at the time. You've gone on to a lot of different things since then, and so what do you do now? We'll circle back to how you got there later.
Right now, I am working on a big project, an animated show, which is kind of new to me. I haven't really done animation before. It's called Gen Z, and it's about 4 college-age online gamers who realize their lives are just so shitty that they, living with their parents and whatnot. So they decide to move in together. So, and they're a very diverse bunch of people. So it's not the most original idea in the world. College roommates. And in fact, one of my big inspirations for this was The Young Ones, which was a similar deal. But this is a very contemporary, updated look at what it's like to have grown up being drenched and saturated with nothing but tech and social media, which kids have been. We kind of entered into it when it arrived. We kind of knew who we were. We'd had places to discover ourselves. But when you're inundated with so much, the stuff to download and millions of things to listen to watch, millions of games to download, everything's just at people's fingertips.
Right.
And then of course hundreds of dating apps and ways to communicate. What does that then mean for someone who's grown up knowing nothing other than that? So a very long-winded way of saying that's what I'm doing right now.
You do a lot of writing as well?
I'm working on other projects, trying to get those going as well. All live action. This is the first animated thing I've ever really done. And then my day job right now is I'm writing, producing for a marketing production company based in Hollywood.
Oh, okay. And how did you get to where you are now? Because most people's career takes some very interesting curvy paths along the way.
Well, I've taken a fairly curvy path. Started off when I went to University of Florida. So when I graduated there, moved to New York City, bought a one-way ticket, and was hell-bent on not returning to Florida, which is where we'd emigrated to when I was a teenager. And lived there for 5 years, had the time of my life. Wrote for an MTV game show like right out of college. Other highlights included, I think I was invited out for dinner with Phil Collins at one point. They wanted me to become his publicist.
Right.
And I was like, I'm not interested, but this was a lovely meal and Phil Collins was a lovely, lovely man. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. Things like that. And then I moved out to LA to do promos, on-air promos, and within a year I started working at E! Entertainment, and then within a year of that, I found myself in the middle of a 6-figure bidding war between ABC and NBC to go do promos for them, which was, it was pretty surreal, pretty gosh darn surreal. So I did that for a while, the reason I moved out here was to be a writer of scripted content, not next week on an all-new such and such, this happens. And which is just soul-destroying. You're locked in a little edit bay with one person for 8, 9, 10 hours a day. Wasn't much fun. So from there, I quit. I threw away a 6-figure salary job because I thought, I'm only getting older, not getting any younger, so I may as well do something soon. And so I did. I quit, and within a year of that, I started Goodnight Burbank. And that's, more interesting curves on the road of online content. Burbank then became the first ever half-hour scripted comedy made for the web. That debuted on Hulu, because we did it as a 5-minute version first, and then this half-hour version came about in 2010 is when we produced it. 2011 is when it premiered on Hulu. And again, in another surreal moment of wow, Mark Cuban was watching the day it premiered on Hulu and was like, oh, I want this for HDNet. And we became the first half-hour show and I think so far only, to go from the web to TV as is. So it's been an interesting ride. Those are just some of the highlights. Some of the lowlights include, almost losing your house because you're not making enough money and you're struggling, things like that. I think the latest lowlight is, it's interesting, is the internet. Some of the darker recesses, the armpit and the arseholes of the internet, the 4chan, 8chan type websites, are attacking all things Gen Z because they don't like seeing anything progressive. They don't like seeing a trans woman in a lead role. They don't like the fact that in the 2-minute trailer, because that's all they've got to judge anything on. We refer to the white guy as a psycho because he's likes to be violent.
Psycho behavior.
Well, the irony is he's based on the Vivian character in The Young Ones. Literally, there's no other intentions there, but they, a lot of these people think that we're intent on destroying all white straight men, which would be awkward, ostensibly being one. Yeah, I really, I do have an amount of self-loathing, but as we all do, but not to that degree. So there's a couple of lowlights as well.
So you're kind of internet famous. So what's that like?
What's it like? It's like nothing really. It's internet fame doesn't necessarily pay the mortgage, but it lets me know I'm on the right path to do the right thing. What I would love to be able to do is be in a position where I can create content that affects the social dialogue. I would love to do that. I think with Gen Z we will be. Goodnight Burbank was to a lesser degree. Food has arrived. Goodnight Burbank to a lesser degree talked about what is it like when we just blindly accept what people in the news, in media, tell us. And it was just trying to kind of puncture that pomposity and that the fact that news people at the end of the day, they're just like anybody else. They've got their own agendas, they've got their own insecurities, and so on and so forth. Just because they're groomed well and have gorgeous white teeth doesn't necessarily mean that they're telling us the absolute truth. And I think it was all inspired by, of course, the war in Iraq, when we were told there were weapons of mass destruction, and we all followed blindly in. So with Gen Z, it's more about, with this trans lead character, it's about acceptance and love and just, a lot of people don't know trans people. Yeah. So I think when you don't know somebody, it's much easier to be able to point at it and to judge it and to prejudge it, etc. That's what prejudice is, you're prejudging. So having a character who's warm, friendly, charming, and funny, she's a stand-up comic, I think will help, viewers see that trans people are just like every other kinds of people. People is people.
And you've been fortunate to get some fairly well-known voices for the character.
Oh, we got some fantastic people on board. Yeah, it started off, I reached out to Jane Weedland from the Go-Go's, who's also a really successful, popular actress. And we follow each other on Twitter. So I sent her a little message saying, would you give us like a 1-2 sentence cameo? So she said, well, send me the script. So I did. And 3 days later, she writes me back and she says, no, I'm not going to do it. She said, I'm so in love with the script, you better write me a recurring featured role. And so I was like, yes, thank you. So I did, and she flew out from San Francisco, and she recorded, we recorded all her bits. We've got people like Hal Sparks, who was in Queer as Folk, and Lab Rats, an amazing comedian. Richard Schiff, from Toby and the West Wing to everything else. Miracle Laurie from Dollhouse, I work with her in Goodnight Burbank. And Matt Del Negro, and More Food. That's your food. So it's looking good. We've got some great names, great people on board, and really, really, really excited with it.
Well, I'm going to cycle back to our first contact, which was Goodnight Burbank, because I discovered Goodnight Burbank online. I'm not exactly sure how, and I thought that at the time it was a real attempt to do something that had high production value, had sort of almost broadcast production values, and yet it's still been something that was new, fresh, as you said, had some social commentary to it. And I thought that was fairly interesting. I thought that was, it inspired me at the time, because that was what really was intriguing me, is how much we can democratize production with the new tools that we've got. And I always circle back to say, look at what we're doing in a restaurant, and what somebody would do with that with a creative mind.
Well, that's what I enjoyed most about it, is you can do anything you want. The downside is that because anybody can do it, everybody is. So you're getting literally billions of videos uploaded on a regular basis to the YouTubes, and 99% of it is crap. This, of course, excluded. But I'm talking about mostly scripted stuff, and I thought this is a perfect opportunity for people to be original, to do something original, or to learn as they, which was, Goodnight Burbank was never intended to be a smash success that wound up on television. It literally was born from an improv class I was taking at UCB at the time.
Right.
And somebody in the class was like, "Oh, I've got cameras and we can do something for the web and for mobile." I didn't even know what mobisodes were at the time. Right. This was 2005, and I just thought this is a perfect opportunity to really try and do something. But the thing I think a lot of people forget is take the time to develop something. Don't just. The script is so important, and I think that's what made Goodnight Burbank so successful. Was we started with a great script, and then everything we added onto that made it even better. An amazing cast, it looked good, etc., etc. So I wish I would see more of that on the web today. But it also doesn't help that I'm an absolute comedy snob anyway. So most things don't really make me laugh that much, especially not thrown up on YouTube.
Even if you say that most of the scripted stuff on the web is not very good, but the truth is that most of the stuff that gets greenlit for the full schedule, most of that gets axed within a couple of months. So it's not very good either.
It's true. It's true. There's just as much crap on television as Well, maybe there's obviously more bandwidth on the net to contain more crap. Yes. But yeah, there's definitely. And that's done through sweetheart deals and all kind of awful reasons for why bad television gets made. I don't think that people in development at the networks, they're all very intelligent people. They wouldn't be there if they weren't. But their number one priority as a human being is to keep their job. And so to do that, in many cases, you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to create programming that's too niche, especially at a broadcasting company that's supposed to be broad. So they kind of fall back on the most average, kind of shows there are, because they want to keep their jobs, and that's perfectly understandable, because who doesn't? It's only those networks like HBO, etc., that have made it their mandate to do something different and original. That's why you see it. The same smart, wonderful people that work at the networks go there and back to the cable networks too. It's all revolving shares. They're all smart and intelligent. It's just, what is the mandate of the network?
Right.
And sometimes the wrong show will end up on a network.
Swingtown.
Swingtown, yeah. It's totally inappropriate for CBS.
I didn't see that one.
It was set in the swinging 70s, airline pilots and in one house and doing the whole swinging 60s thing.
Tea party, kind of.
And then their neighbours move in from the suburbs across the road and slowly discover this other world that exists from their extreme straight-laced suburban lifestyle. Now, on HBO, I think that would have just flown for a lot longer, but on CBS, it was just too edgy for CBS. I mean, CBS being a network that is generally, I think, has an older audience.
Yeah. I'm very surprised that got greenlit.
Yeah, but it was completely inappropriate for the network, but it was a great show. It was really well written, well produced, a lot of social commentary about that era, and how people who weren't exposed to it had to adapt to the world that they were going in, and how they slightly, their moral foundation slightly shifted and they were moved into different areas?
It's because they were a monogamous suburban couple who suddenly were exposed to the world of swingers and got roped into it. I deliberately didn't say sucked into it. I can self-edit.
Much like my parents didn't, I guess.
Your parents?
It's much like they didn't get caught up in the world of swinging.
No, not mine, but we had a much more suburban upbringing, so, and it wasn't the 70s anymore. Although we escaped from Tasmania very early. As you like us migrated from outside. I mean, you're not an American, or I mean, not born here.
I mean, I've lived here twice as long as I lived in England. But I think moving here as a teenager, teenagers, just by very definition, are outsiders, even within their own cliques and world. And so as a teenager, feeling like an outsider to begin with, I really felt like an outsider being moved to, of all places, Florida, which has led to my, fairly deep hatred of Florida and all things Floridian.
Florida would have to be the most different place from England you could come up with in this country.
Certainly in the 80s, and there's no internet, nothing's metropolitan. It's all feathered back hair and Leonard Skinner. Whereas I wanted to listen to, Duran Duran, and before they were popular over here. So it's interesting. I've always felt like an outsider in this country, that I have a home, I've been married in, that I have a house, and so on and so forth. And I went back in 2010 to England, and when I was almost scared of. Why don't you take that one? I was almost scared of going back to England because it had been so long since I'd been there, and I didn't know what to expect. How badly had it changed, or Americanized, or whatever. I realized that even though, like that bookshop was now a cafe, and that cafe was now a bookshop, it was still England. Okay. And I realized I was blessed at that moment. I realized I had two homes. Not many people can say they've got two homes. And I really felt that, a lot more embracing of my American home than ever before. Perhaps if I'd gone to England and visited England sooner, and not left like a 20-year gap, I would have realized that a lot sooner.
Yeah, I had a 10-year gap. I went back to Australia for family reunion this last year, and
How was that after 10?
Well, again, it was very much like I was a stranger in the country that I grew up in. I've spent the vast majority of my life in. Didn't feel like home, and that's the odd thing, is that even before I moved here, Los Angeles felt very much like home, even before it was home. I say regularly that I lived in .com for a lot longer than I've lived in America. So I lived in .com from the other side of the world, but LA's always felt like home, even though it's not one of America's great cities. I mean, I think San Francisco and Boston are much more interesting cities, have a much more interesting city life. New York doesn't appeal to me so much, but again, is a more interesting city. But right from the start, I feel more with a sense of place here than I do back in Australia. It's a little also alienating that because I've moved out of Australia on a permanent basis, and when I come back, I now have to put that I am a visitor to my own country on the departure card. Yeah. So, I mean, at this point, I'm proceeding into citizenship. So I've decided that this is where home is going to be for the foreseeable future. So I might as well be fully participant in it.
Cool. Something I should do at some point.
It also helps that I can then bring my spouse to America. And get him a permanent green card.
Yeah. That's a win-win.
Yeah, it's a win-win all round. A lot of our guests have bemoaned the decline in the economy. The production world that they knew, grew up, and were very successful in has changed dramatically. Have you found that, or do you think that this democratization is offering more opportunity rather than losing?
I've spent my professional life creating content outside the mainstream. And so I've had to find ways to do it as judiciously as possible. And so I've not been affected by that. In fact, I see ways of producing on a budget, on a shoestring, that doesn't mean you can't still achieve some amazing things. Now, obviously, we're not going to produce a Star Wars anytime soon on the budgets that are generally, what people...
Although keep in mind, Deep Space Nine, the 3D rendering was done with commercially available tools.
Well, the tools are a lot cheaper, but you still need to assemble them all and pay people and so on and so forth. I know someone who's a fantastic DP and director, has access to everything from, he's got a drone now, he's got all kinds of rigs, and that's great, but still wants to get paid.
Yeah.
So I look at doing things with kind of an interesting, unconventional business model. And it all starts off with working on a project that you can get people to believe in. Once they believe in something, then it's much easier to start assembling a cast and crew that are talented, that are of note, that know what they're doing, in order to create something that can then potentially... we're not looking at rivaling a network. We're looking at producing something that's of network quality, right? Or certainly within that realm. And that's what I think we can do. That's what I think is possible in this new world. So I'm not really affected by how much the economy has tanked budgets and whatnot. Not yet, at least, anyway.
It has to tank a long way before the budgets we're working with become threatened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've also grown up outside the production system, I guess. Independent producer right from the start, independent production facility, moved into doing my own content because that's a nice way of filling in those gaps when you don't have external work.
Right.
It's, I've still got this equipment. Yeah. I've got all this time.
And leases to pay.
And leases to pay, so I might as well do something. So, but I've always been trying to do it on the lowest amount of money I can spend because I've never had those big commercial budgets, and yet still generate the quality. And so I've a lot of tools like the computer video instrument that Fairlight did for a couple of years, which was groundbreaking at the time. Yeah. Amiga-based animation tools. These were a ways of getting into production that create high quality without having the large expense of the big production crew, the big production kit. And then the Solar Odyssey Adventure in 2012 was where I started to really look and see not only how unconventional, but how small can I make a production kit. And it's not often that you can actually walk to a shoot with your entire production kit over your shoulder.
Right. The convenience of this technology is phenomenal.
Totally aside, Mr. Greg, I am totally seeing why those Danes want the travelling timeline.
Yeah.
I just want to be able to glance and see what it is that I'm logging at the moment.
Really?
Yeah, it's really yeah. It's one of the ideas is to eat our own dog food. Mm-hmm. Is we make this system called Lumberjack because it's a logger, and bad pun at the same time, and having had to use it, the more I use it, the more I realise the features that it needs, because it was largely built for me for that 2012 project.
Right.
And then we realised it has a lot of added advantages. And
did you buy the GoPros, or are they? That's a GoPro, right?
yeah, there's two 4K GoPros, Hero Black. Yeah.
So is that like you got those from the sponsor type of thing, or did you pay for them?
I frankly prefer to pay for everything, simply because then I can say, look, this is a great tool, or this tool doesn't quite meet its expectations, which is the politically correct way of saying it's a piece of shit. I do prefer to pay for everything. Yes, sponsorship would be lovely. It would be very, very nice, but at the same time, it to some degree makes you beholden. It makes you, and probably intentionally, it makes you less unbiased. You're always going to have much more positive feelings about a product that is sponsored than if you had an objective, I have to pay for it. Now, I did wait until...
So, how have those GoPros been working out for you?
In that I'm using the GoPros outside of their intended use,
right.
I think they're working very, very well. They can be a little fussy. In the batteries only run about 45 minutes, and even if you use the big battery pack, it still cuts out at 45 minutes, it overheats. So So there are those sort of challenges, but they make possible something that would otherwise be completely impossible. Because being 4K, I can reposition, I can reframe in post, if I've got it slightly out of angle, I can do a zoom in, I can have a couple of different shots. We can go into 200% of the original shot.
I've just been reading that 4K is the next step. The only, because YouTube now accepts 4K videos, the only obstacle at the moment is some people will need accessories and stuff to be able to view it properly.
Really?
Is that? I just read this the other day.
Well, I'm actually more positive about high dynamic range than 4K per se. If you can shoot in 4K and it doesn't cost anything more to produce it and store it, well then by all means go right ahead, do 4K. It makes a lot of sense, but not necessarily for 4K distribution. And I think in terms of the distribution, high dynamic range will have a lot more impact on the viewer experience, because most people's perception of sharpness is actually contrast, not pure resolution. Films have never been about resolution and sharpness, because the nature of film and gate weave means that it's never going to be sharp, and they've never really gone for sharpness. They've gone for a feeling and a mood. So the technology for just 4K, more resolution, doesn't necessarily make it any more real. It just makes it harder to deal with. It does give you the opportunity, to repurpose and to take things for a longer life, and enables production that wasn't possible. I do say that, even though I did pay for them, I did wait until after NAB, because I've known in the past that at NAB, if you go to the GoPro booth, you can sign up for a discount that comes in the month after NAB. So I knew that I wanted to buy them for this, for a family history project, for a cooking show project. But saving $100 per camera was worth waiting an extra 2 months on delaying the project. Yeah. So you're more towards the storytelling side. You want to use storytelling for social change?
Yeah, I think especially with comedy, is if you make people laugh first,
Yes.
and then they start thinking afterwards, and I think you've done a great job at that point. There's many ways of informing and educating people. Just look at racism. What is the core reason for racism? Generally, it's ignorance. So if you can educate people, and show them how they're wrong to be prejudiced against whoever they're prejudiced against, but do it in a way that makes them come to it themselves, so they're not feeling preached to or dictated to. I think that's my approach, at least. There's many different approaches, obviously. That's my approach, is how do we educate and making them smile at the same time. I look at my own history. I've not been an angel from day one. I've at various points in my youth had thoughts that I'm not proud of, as I think all of us have to a varying degree. We just don't like talking about it. But it's when it's as you get older and you gain experience and gain a little bit of wisdom, you realize how wrong and stupid you were, and you grow, as we all do. I think that one thing this as a society right now, culturally at least, because of commerce, we concentrate too much on the kids and youth culture, and I think we're doing ourselves a disservice by ignoring or not listening to our older people because they're not sexy enough, and yet they know 100 times more than we know because they've experienced it. But anyway, that's kind of how I want to go about my work.
Yeah, I think similar with homophobia and the more out gay people have been, the more visible that they have been, the more people who suddenly know somebody who's gay, and it's like, oh, well, we know Philip and Greg, and they seem to be okay. The people that moved in next door seem to be okay, or it's your niece or your nephew, and suddenly realise, you actually do know gay people, and they're not something horrible that you have to be scared of, or out there that simply doesn't exist.
Well, I know television has gone a long way to helping that. You had the Will and Grace, which basically just showed that gay people are normal people.
And the ever subversive Neil Patrick Harris.
Yeah. And then the 1-2 punch of Modern Family just kind of, clearing that up. You've got this gay couple who, again, normal human beings. And so to a lot of people, I think it serves two purposes. One is it empowers, in this particular case, we're talking about gay people, to come out and to be happy with who they are.
Right.
Because they're seeing it represented on television in a way that's removing shame and stigma.
Yeah.
And then the second thing it does is now more people are coming out. There's a statistic I read recently while we were doing some research on Gen Z. They did, and I'm going to paraphrase everything because my memory is awful, but I do remember the numbers. So they do, every generation, I guess they check in and with kids of that generation to see where they stand. Are they, homosexual, straight, bi, etc. And this most recent one that they've just done for this young generation has seen people who declare themselves LGBT is twice as much as they did in the last generation. Now, does that mean that so it went from 3.5 to I think 7%? Does that mean there are 3.5% more LGBT people? No. Just 3.5% more LGBT people that are comfortable in saying that they are.
Yeah.
And you've got to think that the knock-on effect of, so if that's 7% of the population, 93%, you've got to figure that there's a larger percentage of straight people who are far more comfortable and far happier and not bothered by the LGBT people that they may have been a generation previously.
Yeah, homophobia is pretty much generational these days, and it will eventually die out.
Yeah, and so we're seeing that. We're seeing that move in the right direction. And again, it's from people who are empowered to say strongly, this is who I am. And then people in their families and neighborhoods suddenly know somebody who's gay that they didn't previously know, because they had no idea they were gay. So I think it's all building on everything, it all builds on everything else. All the bricks come together and we move forward. We pave that road together,
You previously mentioned Modern Family. Did you know that rates incredibly well among Republican voters?
I didn't know. I guess although they just need a walk-on from Donald Trump now, and that show will go through the roof.
No, I'm pretty sure I read that. It's more popular with Republican voters than Democratic voters.
Huh, I wonder why.
Well, it's a show about family. It's not
I
really.
guess it's the older white guy with the hot young girl.
Oh, right.
It's probably what they relate to the most. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh, well, partly it might be that you can relate to the sort of the frustration that he has. He's seen how the times have changed. He has a gay son, but he doesn't really relate to the gay son in the same way that he would have had his son been straight. Mm-hmm. And so, that's probably something that older generations could relate to.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Yeah. There's not just this blind acceptance. There's this kind of, bumping and stumbling along. Still loves him, but he's still a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, and nobody's particularly. I quite like the writing in that show because nobody's perfect, nobody's golden, everybody's just a little.
I enjoy that show. The writing is fantastic, as well as the acting. Really good show. And doing a lot to move barriers and push things forward.
Quite subversively.
Yeah, exactly. You don't think of Modern Family on the face of it as a show that's changing opinions, but it is. And why? Because they're using laughter to get their points across.
The power of comedy.
The power of comedy.
Oh, it's interesting. You look at some of the comedy that came out in the 70s, very bold, that we're not really seeing much of anymore. Like All in the Family and, that kind of stuff where envelopes were pushed broadly. But nowadays it's a lot more reined in. Mm-hmm. It's not as strong as it was.
Is that because the networks are a little bit more shy about it, or they're thinking about advertisers or standards and practices
I think
too?
It's a combination of all those things. You've got, the PC police wouldn't stand for what people got away with in the 70s, even when they were making points in the 70s politically. You still couldn't get away with that now. And then, of course, just so culture has shifted slightly because it's become so much more homogenized because of advertisers are so much more, they want such a much more homogenized, not just audience, but the content has to be more homogenized. It's just pure, it's just, you know, it's not as exciting or as original as it once was in many places, other than, of course, you know, the HBOs of the world.
Once you've broken down all the barriers, then there are no more barriers to break down.
Well, there are still plenty of barriers to break down. There are still plenty of barriers to break down. It's, you know, but
We can swear on TV, we can't show nipples, but we can chainsaw somebody's head off, but as long as their nipples aren't showing.
exactly. I don't want to see any nipples in this interview either, because I will storm.
No nipples in this interview.
Only my own, and even then, I will most likely vomit.
I must say it's strange to be so nipple phobic when we are in Burbank's most Hooters adjacent sushi restaurant.
That is true. I think this small area is very nipple friendly.
Yes, I think so.
The Burbank is a lot more advanced than you'd think.
Yes, but you've got to go all the way down to First Street to find it. One block up and it's much more civilized.
A police station is one block. I mean, the civil, the courthouse and everything else is all a block away.
Do you have any advice that you would give your younger self?
My younger self.
That's a great question.
Or somebody else coming up in a career, but if you had advice to give your younger self.
So it's funny you should ask that question. Just last night, I got an email from a dear old friend who'd come across this old script that I'd written, a spec script for Seinfeld. And I started reading it. And for a 23-year-old, it wasn't bad. Now, I'm not just saying that because it was me that wrote it. I'm the harshest critic of my own stuff all the time. And it certainly wasn't, you know, it certainly needed some work. It wasn't a perfect script by any stretch of the imagination. But it was a hell of a lot better than I thought my younger self could have done. And so there was a moment of kind of melancholy for the fact that I never got that break.
Yeah.
You know, like I had to create my own break ultimately. So, advice I would have given that younger me, I would have told him not to have been so scared, to have gotten up and done more. It took me a long time to start overcoming fear. I didn't want to get on stage for the longest time because I was fearful that I would be awful. I was fearful that I'd be laughed at, not, you know, weird. And it took me many, many years to take that class at UCB and Improv Olympic and so on and so forth, and realized, why did I spend this long being so afraid of rejection, of being made fun of, you know, so on and so forth. And I think fear is what drives us all in every single path of our lives. Fear of the unknown, fear of
How many times I've not done something because I'm afraid that I'll get rejected, so I don't even try.
Yeah, and I think that you know, it's one thing, you know, you need a break, you need that person, you need this something.
Yeah, it's luck.
Luck is a huge part of it, but overcoming fear, I think, is something that is much larger, and I don't think we address it as much in our daily lives as we should do. You know, I don't know how many decisions a day we each make where fear is an element in each of those, in each and every one of those decisions to some degree. So I could go back and tell the younger me to write more, to develop more, all the things that most, you know, certainly writer producers tell a younger audience. Here's what you need to do, you know, don't give up, write every day, blah, 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 blah. Well, yeah, sure, okay, do all of those things, but try to overcome your fear. That would be the number one thing I would say to a younger me.
What would be the biggest changes you've seen during your career?
Biggest changes? Well, technology just keeps making things far more available and wide-reaching. I also think that we've seen the web start to become a serious contender, and mobile, for video content, which was when I started in 2000. We launched Goodnight Burbank in March 2006. We were on the front page of iTunes like 3 months later, because there wasn't much content out there. You know, we were part of a handful of people producing things. To say that there's a handful now is just absolute crap, because there's, like I said, billions and billions of videos out there, and they're uploaded regularly. So that's a huge change.
You'll love this. My college-age niece asked me, "Have you ever heard of podcasting?" And it was all I could do to say, "Honey, I was there at the very beginning, you know."
It's almost not called podcasting anymore.
But it's had a resurgence, believe it or not, amongst the young people.
The kids.
Yes, the kids these days talk about podcasting.
Our niece's age.
Well, I think there was again, doing a lot of research for Gen Z, there's 76% of millennials, at least 76% are recording video content on a regular, if not daily basis. Right. So 3/4 of our nation's youth is putting themselves online in one way or another, whether it's, you know, just recording them talking with their friends or whatever it might be. Right. They're posting stuff constantly.
So what would be really interesting would be to see a graph of, you know, the amount of total video content generated starting in, say, 1950 to now, year by year.
It's going to be a hockey stick. It's just going to go whoomp.
You know, we know in the 50s, in this country alone, there were just essentially 3 networks. Mm-hmm. And then we you know, Fox came in late as the 4th network.
Right.
Rupert Murdoch had to change nationalities to make that happen. And then about...
Can you relinquish your nationality if you're from hell? Is that possible?
Sure. I think he retains that citizenship, I think, forever, yeah. Yes, we have a similar opinion of Mr. Murdoch. And then we had the explosion of cable channels that just suddenly took off in the mid-90s. Right. There was a bill that Clinton signed into law that made that happen.
Yeah, and 10 years later, the proliferation of the internet media began. You know, it's exciting. I'm so glad that I was a part of it when it started, and I'm so glad to still be a part of it. You know, with Gen Z right now, we are, as well as all the names and the fun bits and pieces, we're signing a deal this week with a 3D animation studio that want to come on board and do everything in 3D. Now, what that means is, to the uninitiated, of which I was uninitiated recently.
And I still am.
So, The Simpsons. The Simpsons is done in 3D. They model everyone. There's Homer. There's all of them modeled as 3D models, which then makes it far easier to animate things. So you just tell the computer what to color it, and then you tell the computer where to move things. Okay. So and of course everything is reusable. So it brings your animation costs and time way down. But it doesn't look 3D. They apply a filter, I'm calling it a filter, it's probably more than that, called 2D shading. And that then renders it to look like a regular 2D, two-dimensional cartoon.
I had no idea.
Neither did I. I learned this a few months ago. So it started with, if I can back up a second, one of the elements of Gen Z that hopefully makes it a little more unique is they met, as I said before, they met in an online game environment. So I created this game, which hopefully we can spin off as a real game if the show becomes successful down the road. So, so Friends, they had their coffee shop to hang out in. Yes. Cheers, they had the bar. Well, with Gen Z, they have their online game to, so they can shoot the shit while shooting aliens. Yeah. Okay. So we have this 3D artist came on board, Terrace Nova, to render each of those scenes out as a full 3D video game environment. It will look like a video game whenever they're in the video game. Right. And then we're signing with Big Little Effects, and the head of Big Little, John Mitchell, said, I want to be able to do the rest of it in 3D. Not, Tara's segments are going to be just video game 3D. The rest of it, like The Simpsons, will look 2D, but will be all built and rendered 3D, which means our lead designer animator, Alex, now is just going to, he has a full-time job. He's been doing this in his living room, and he hasn't been able to do as much of it as we'd hoped. So all he has to concentrate on is designing the characters, giving us expression sheets and stuff on each character, and then he's going to do the backgrounds, because he does these beautifully drawn, pencil-drawn backgrounds. So he's going to hand all that stuff over to Big Little Effects. They will then create these 3D models and use his backgrounds, import them into the computer, do whatever they have to do to make that all work. Yeah, and then once that machine has started up, it's going to take 3 to 4 days to create each character. Once they've all been created, then we can start on the actual animation, and that will take 2 or 3 weeks per episode, I'm told. I hope. So, so it looks like it's going to be a really exciting time. Would we need a network to do this? No, a network gives you the money to produce something like this and to market something like this. So, we don't need the money to produce it. We're doing this ourselves. I'm funding it via interesting deals that some of which are deferred pay, but are really tasty deals. Again, it's unconventional. I'm not a business major by any stretch of the imagination, but using the imagination, you can come up with an interesting deal for people who already believe in a project to begin with, that sees them rewarded on a back end, but sees them rewarded 2 to 3 times as we make money back on the back end, to the point where ultimately they will get paid more. If the show is hugely successful, they will get paid more than had they been hired for their regular fee and paid up front. So that we can see them, they can see themselves making twice as much, perhaps. And they already believe they have to believe in the project anyway in order to come on board, because it's all a gamble. It's like, so how do you mitigate that gamble? Well, you've got this great cast, you've got hopefully a good script, you've got an interesting concept, and it's got legs. The promo has just surpassed, we're coming up to 300,000 views on the 2-minute trailer. We just surpassed 200 on YouTube, and we're close to 100 on a separate one on Facebook. And we've been on the cover already of the Pasadena Weekly, which was amazing because there's no show yet. It's just this 2-minute trailer was and I mean the big cover story. I'm not talking like it was mentioned. Big ass picture of them dominated the front page a few weeks ago. We've been raved about in the Huffington Post, in the Advocate, and a bunch of other smaller blogs and stuff. So I think we've got something special here, and so now the question is, how do we get the marketing money? Because like I said, the network offers production and marketing. So that's the next nut to crack. And if I can work out some interesting deals with people in that field, then I will. We'll see. So far we've gotten some great marketing just by word of mouth.
Yes.
But we would need more, obviously, than what we have thus far. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I'm really excited. And for it to have gotten this far, I think it shows how special this project is.
It deserves all the success.
Thank you. I hope it does. I hope it gets there. And then we play the networks at their own game. Because looking to the future, what are more unconventional deals that we can do? The show is going to hopefully make a lot of money in terms of merchandise, as animated shows often do. So we have that. By not signing with a network, I retain all the IP. Right. So maybe we do a deal with a network in the future once the show is an established success, where we license them episodes of the show. Yeah. We license them 10, 12 episodes and retain the IP and not just give everything up, because the networks will want original episodes if it's a success on their network, on their platform.
Yes.
And we can produce those for them without saying, and here's the entire, kit and caboodle. No, we wouldn't need to do that. We say, okay, well, how many episodes do you want? We will do a deal where you own those episodes, not the IP, and we will write and produce those episodes for you, and so on and so forth. And
Very unconventional.
yeah, but I think there's a chance that it might happen, and we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't think there would be. I think at the end of the day, we think we've got a good show.
Yeah.
Everybody who sees the script seems to think so. So, touch wood.
Yes. Well, picking up on that and then say moving forward, you've had this trajectory of doing unconventional things. What do you think will be the biggest changes that you'll see during the substantial rest of your career?
Well, speaking for a moment as the neurotic English Jew that I am, every day you question whether or not you're going to make it, whether or not that veil will part and you will move through. So on the one hand, I don't want to suggest that I have this amazing career ahead of me. I'd like to think I might. So I'll just to get that out of the way. I mean, English too. I'm not this. Hey, yes, of course I'm amazing. No.
Yeah, I knew that I had adapted to living in America when I put on a business card, Big Brains for Rent, as a consultancy, because that was very un-Australian.
Yeah, it must have been a little awkward for a while. So, but I think I would like to see. I'd like to sell more projects. I would like to see where they go in terms of what platform they live on. I think what Netflix and Amazon are doing is fantastic. Would love to be on their platform as a part of that. I would love to be doing something that fits on television in like a FX or at HBO or platforms like that. I don't need to do a hugely successful, slightly more not as intelligent show on a network. I'm not living to do that. That's not what I want to do. If one comes my way with an amazing amount of money, I probably won't say no. Certainly if I can use that money to fund the next project, that I want to do personally, I'm not going to be an idiot and
Throw it away.
Yeah, exactly. There's got to be a strategy there.
Because fame is a very valuable commodity.
I think when I was much younger, I was like, oh, wouldn't it be great to be famous, as most people think. And I think over the years that's morphed into, I would just like to be successful, and I do think that, again, it was a strategy more than anything to put myself in Goodnight Burbank, because I knew that wherever I went, there went the face of the show.
Yeah.
And if I was attending, keynoting NAB and all these things I was doing, I wasn't just a guy that, a faceless guy that produced something. Oh, that's the guy who's in it.
Yeah.
So that helped. I can see the value in that, but I'm not looking to be so famous that I can't move. I enjoy my life, and it's really lovely now when every once in a while somebody approaches me with a lovely compliment about Burbank or this or that, the other. That's great, and it thrills me. Absolutely, the thrill has not gone anywhere. But I don't want it to be any more than that. Anything more than that is just, I'd like to enjoy my life.
Do you want to have a go at predicting any of the future changes that we might see in society or technology?
In terms of predicting the future, if I had a crystal ball, I would have already used it to my advantage. I think what's interesting right now is politically, we're seeing the Republican Party undergo some serious changes. We're seeing, I believe, maybe wrongly, that 8 years of Obama has not allowed is the wrong word, but has shown us the dirtier side of American culture that is bigoted, that is racist, that is hateful. I think we've seen that grow. I sometimes feel like we're going backwards, not forwards.
Well, we did with gay rights though. A lot of particularly sort of marriage equality. A lot of states passed constitutional amendment. So, you know, at the early 2000s, we were going backwards quickly on that particular battle, and yet it turned around fairly quickly. So I wonder if what we're seeing is this over-emphasis on something that will be reacted against I'm hoping desperately.
Well, I mean, there was a wonderful article in the Atlantic yesterday that says that as a whole right now, culturally, politically, this country is leaning more and more left, and that would be great if it was. And they were talking about this the stuff we're hearing from the far right as kind of it's very vocal, but it's the minority of people hating that. I'm seeing a lot of that with the hatred that we've gotten, you know, from the Gen Z haters. I mean, it's just every other day. There's anti-Semitic comments, there's transphobic comments, homophobic comments, just absolute racism against black people, Asian people, because this is what makes up the cast and of the show, and that has me concerned. You know, I thought we were supposed to be getting more intelligent, and having seen these people. You know, they all love to remain anonymous, obviously.
Yes, and it's part of the horrible part of the internet is that you can.
But I think writing them off as kids who live in their mother's basement is. I think that's too. It's too dangerous to do that, because a lot of the stuff we have to look at seriously. You know, who are these people? Force them into the light. You know, I think the light is going to do far better for us as a society than allowing people to remain dark in dark spaces anonymously. You know, let's let these people stand up and be. We had on a small microcosm basis, we did a panel. Gen Z did a panel at the Long Beach Comic-Con earlier this year, and there was this one girl in the audience, seemed to be well dressed and put together. And she had a phone up, videoing everything we were saying, everything. And we'd already been, you know, one of the cast kind of goes to those boards and reads what's going on a lot. I don't, I won't. But she does, and she brought to my attention a couple of different posts from people, one of whom was threatening violence, was going to show up and do something. And the other one was like, well, I'll be there too, and I'll videotape everything. So the violent one never materialized, but there was she videotaping everything, and we showed like the rough cut, the animatic for the pilot, and I asked her, I asked everyone, but then specifically her, please not tape this. She lowers the phone, there's a chair in front of her, so she lowers the phone so I can't see it, and videotapes the whole thing, and then is presenting herself as a fan of the show. She's telling one of the actresses, Julie, how beautiful she is and how wonderful she is, and then goes right back, posts it all, and again, anonymously, even though obviously we know who it was. But it was astonishing to see somebody who looked relatively normal. I mean, she also looked like she would grow up to be a cat lady and remain single forever. And when you see what she's engaged in, you're not surprised. The hatred, it was brought to my attention that my father has, I get it from him, like one of my eyes droops a little. And when I get tired, it like droops a lot more. But that's it. But one of them it was pointed out to me, one of them was writing, oh, he's had a stroke. Oh, I know for a fact he's had a stroke. Oh, and I'm just pointing this out as just something random. But the picture that they like to paint of us all, they're just making it up, like just as if they've got like authority on what to do. I'm probably rambling a little bit where this is going, but none of these people would be doing any of these things if they had to do it publicly, with their face and their name right out there. None of them would, you know. And I'd like to see. So I don't know if that's going to get worse or better as we in that crystal ball. I'm not sure, but I know we need to shine a light on those people and have them scurry like the rats that they are.
So are you overall positive or somewhat concerned about the future then?
I'm just an overall positive person in general. I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't. You know? So I would like to think that we're all going to, you know, we have moved forward from the year dot. You know, we've not really gone backwards. There may be people who are uneducated and again, a slave to their fears, who want to pull us back. But I think we as a society keep moving forward. Maybe not at a pace that all of us would like, but certainly in our lifetimes alone, what we've seen for civil rights, gay rights, has been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And there are kids today who don't know the struggles of what everybody else before them has had to go through. And in a way that's great, because they will grow up to be hopefully even more happier, well-adjusted people. And maybe then society becomes even better because there's less people like us around. and there's less people, obviously there's less bigots and just uneducated, horrible, stupid people around.
I think that's a perfect time to say thank you very much for coming to lunch with us. And is there a place where people can contact you?
Yes, well, you can find my Twitter full of stupid jokes, which is @Hayden Black. And Gen Z, if you want to follow that on Twitter, it's @Gen_Z. That's GENZED. I need to spell that out because oftentimes people aren't sure what the spelling of that is. So yeah, those are the two main places.
In America, it should be Gen Z.
Well, wanted to make it a little different. Exactly. There was too many Gen Zs already. I thought I'll give it a little European flair, something a little different. So yeah, those are the two places that you can find me.
Thank you very much, Hayden Black, for coming to lunch with Philip and Greg.
Thank you so much. It was a lovely lunch.